facilitate. It is my pleasure to facilitate the monthly community partner meetings. We enjoy this as a time to, one, share resources with you all. We have a presenter today, well, two presenters today that will, and each month we have a great presenter. And then also this is a great time to just network and learn about the work that others are doing within the community as it pertains to older adults and keeping them healthy. And so again, my name is Janelle Bennett. And if you haven't already, may you put your name and contact information in the chat, and this will be a great way for others to stay connected with you. And as you do that, I will go ahead and introduce our presenters for today. We have George Janis and James Sullivan presenting to us today in regards to ways to learn about how to stay financially healthy. And so as we know, as we age, things such as increasing credit card debt, healthcare costs, or just deteriorating financial judgment, all those things can affect the older adult population and just cause extra financial distress. And within this presentation, George Janis of Consumer Debt Counselors and Jim Sullivan of Pay for Care, they will speak with us on how these challenges can be successfully met. George Janis comes to us as the president and CEO of Consumer Debt Counselors Incorporated, and he has been doing this work for over 25 years. This is a nonprofit ISO accredited agency of the CDC, or Consumer Debt Counselors. They work with families who are in financial distress, assisting them with alleviating debt through education and other programs. Jim Sullivan is a retired CPA who for over 20 years has worked with individuals diagnosed with chronic and terminal illnesses and their financial caregivers. Through education and coaching, he assists households to better budget and prepare for the cost of serious illnesses. So without any further wait, we're going to go ahead and pass it over to James Sullivan and George Janis so we can hear some great education from them today.
Well, thank you, Janelle. Thank you very much. Certainly wonderful to be in front of all of you. And I can appreciate the technical difficulties, nothing more stressful than technical difficulties with the timeline, right? Let me ask you this. Are you able to draw up the slides, Janelle, that we have, the presentation slides?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I think we're good to start with that, if that works for you, please.
All righty.
Okay. So good to meet with you. We're just to give everybody a little background, I'll tell you a little bit about Consumer Debt Counselors, Pay for Care, just to give kind of frame this so that the information makes a little more sense to you. Consumer Debt Counselors now is a 25-year-old nonprofit agency. We're located actually in Winter Park, Florida, which is a community just outside of Orlando. And let me tell you, since most of you are in Illinois, frequently, I'm sure, having grown up in Illinois, somewhere around February, you think how wonderful it would be to live in Florida, and that's true. I can tell you, however, July, not so much. It's hotter than you can possibly imagine. Are you able to find those slides, Janelle, or can I help you with that, or are we sharing those yet?
Yes, I have them. I'm sharing it now.
Okay, I'm not seeing them. Is everybody else seeing those? There we go. Perfect. Thank you very much. If we can go to the second slide, if we could, the next one. Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay. So while we're located in Florida, I would tell you we're licensed for the work that we do in 28 states throughout the United States, including Illinois, and also New York and California, very populous areas that are struggling with a lot of these issues. As our name implies, we originally started focusing our career many years ago, 25 years ago, largely on people who are struggling with debt, most particularly credit card debt. For those of you who may not be familiar, credit card debt is now the number 3 ranking level of debt in the United States. The first is still mortgage loans, followed by student loan debt, and then followed by credit card debt. And I would tell you on a national level, the next one coming up after that is automobile loan debt, which is getting to be quite a struggle for people of all ages. So we have worked with helping people resolve debt issues, but our practice has grown bigger. We are now also working with people that are struggling with student loan debt, a very, very complicated area. And a lot of our practice is now working in this area, helping people unwind and understand their options with student loan debt. And surprisingly, I would tell you this impacts a great number of senior citizens. It's presumed that it's not, but we are regularly dealing with people over 60 years old that are still struggling with student loan debts. And the key is understanding the complexities of the regulations as well as all of the information that's floating around through the media. We provide bankruptcy. Pardon me? Okay. We also providing bankruptcy education courses. What you may not be aware of is families that are applying for bankruptcy need to take two courses. One at the beginning to be sure that there aren't any non-bankruptcy options, and another at the end of the bankruptcy to ensure that they're not getting into trouble again. But this ties in again as well with seniors as well, because frequently bankruptcy is an option for senior citizens that are struggling with debt. And finally, I would tell you, we are a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. That's housing and urban development. So we work in working with people who are struggling maintaining their homes, understanding their rights to maintain their home. As well, we do a lot of work in what's called pre-purchase planning, assisting people buying their first home, tied in with some of the county government's down payment assistance programs. Joel mentioned we're ISO certified. That's the International Standards Organization. I mention this to you only because this is a international society. They come in and they audit all business processes that we're involved in. So that's a little bit about consumer debt counselors. Pay for Care is actually a component of consumer debt counselors. Jim Sullivan, who will be one of our speakers here, has been on our board at Consumer Debt Counselors for more than 20 years. And his expertise is taking everything I've just talked to you about, but really focusing in on individuals that are struggling with chronic illnesses or their caregivers. And so often this is tied together, as I'm sure I don't need to mention to this group, but the caregiver and the patient are often closely related, and the complexities of these finances can get really, really pointed, and having expertise in this area is important. I would mention to you, just telling you a little bit about Jim, he has authored over 100 articles to date on this very topic inside of the Journal Accountancy for CPA professionals who are struggling with these same issues as well. So if we can move on to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about what we actually do, okay? So when clients are coming to us initially, they're generally in a crisis mode. Occasionally people are preemptive when they've dealt with a chronic illness and they know this is coming, and they'll reach out to us to evaluate. But generally speaking, it's usually a crisis has brought this to a head. Collection calls have started coming in, perhaps even attempted garnishments. It may be a caregiver who's just working with a parent, often a parent or a loved one, and seeing that suddenly they're behind in their bills or something is out of whack. So the first thing that we do when we're working with a new client is do an assessment. We really no different than any other financial plan. You have to first have a very clear understanding of where that client is at financially, to then be able to determine how they're going to get to the next step. How are we going to correct this? So in this process, it's a fairly extensive process. We are looking at budgets. We are looking at assets. And of course, we're looking at liabilities. And in all too many cases, the liabilities are far outweighing the assets. And so we really need to take a deep look at where these liabilities are. And in that, I would tell you, just as some good base knowledge at a high level, you're going to find debt that your clients are dealing with will generally fall into one of two broad categories: secured debt or unsecured debt. Now, many here on this call may be very familiar with these terms and have heard these terms, but just to be sure we have some clarity. Secured debt refers to debt where the collector or the person who has the debt has rights inside of real or tangible property. Most commonly, that is a mortgage. Okay. In other words, if somebody begins defaulting on their home mortgage, there is a specific way that the lender can actually go back and take the house back. Similarly, on a car loan, they can take the car back. Now, having said all that, this is, of course, a priority debt if you're doing an evaluation. If somebody has their home or their automobile at risk. Okay, so that really needs a lot of tending to be sure we've got all the facts there. However, I would also tell everybody here, while these lenders have the right to take the car and the mortgage, that's generally not what they want. They really want to get the debtor on the right course, if all possible, and not take back the house. So I think the perception is, always that they want to get the house back right away. And generally provided this hasn't gone too far down the road, there are ways of working with the creditor. Unsecured debt is the opposite side of it. This is debt where the lender has rights, but they don't have rights against a specific piece of property, at least not initially. So most common in this area is credit card debt. We certainly hear a lot about it. It's a huge level of debt, and you may be surprised to find that many of the clients that come to us, including the seniors, have fairly extensive levels of credit card debt. It's not uncommon that we have clients coming to us that have $70,000, $80,000, or $100,000 of credit card debt. Now, if you're familiar with credit card debt, it frequently is at interest rates of 18% or more. So now that debt is almost, unless they've got a lot of resources, almost unable to be repaid at those current interest rates. That credit card company, if someone defaults, cannot come in and instantly take a house or take a car, okay? They do have some rights of what they can and cannot do. We'll talk a little bit about that. It's a really extensive topic. Medical debt is another area. Frequently, we find that if the debt is owed to large medical institutions, hospital systems, and the like, there is room to negotiate. Frequently, there are programs to help people who are really struggling if they're low to moderate income. I would tell you, in addition to this, as we're doing these evaluations, frequently we'll see payday loan debt, something that you may not hear a lot about, but payday loans are loans that are given based upon a paycheck. And in some states, Illinois being one, some people can get more than one payday loan on one paycheck. Interest rates on payday loans can be 400% to 600% interest. So you are now almost in a trap, and unwinding that trap is very, very a little more difficult. It can be done. And then finally, as I mentioned, student loans, something that we think of for people that are far younger or in school, and certainly that is the case, but it's also affecting the senior community in a very big way. We've had one program that we've worked with AARP that was working with low and moderate income families who are struggling with seniors struggling with student loan debt. So these are the kind of things that we look at this first step as we're evaluating the liability section that somebody is dealing with. And then how you deal with that is based upon, of course, what they've got and where they're at in the collection process. So let's talk a little bit about how debt matures or how it grows. Janelle, could you move up to the next slide, please? Thank you very much. I hope everyone can see this one. This we put together is just a very simple example. Excuse me. This is a fairly simple example of credit card debt. This is an individual we see coming in that has $30,000 of credit card debt, and they're current. 18% is the typical rate of interest we'll see, some higher. Not uncommon to see people coming in with interest rates of 28 to 30% on their credit cards, but 18, I would say, is the most common. The interesting thing you'll find, if they're making only minimum payments, it takes 29 years to pay off that debt. 29 years. So it starts as a small amount, grows fairly rapid. What we're not showing here is if somebody defaults and isn't making that payments, then you will find the debt growing at a geometric rate as the collection process starts. So let's talk briefly about somebody who's in that terrible situation. Can you move the slide up one, please, again? So if somebody is falling behind, a senior or their caregiver, okay, there's a number of things that we're going to take a look at. It depends on where this debt is at in the collection process. So frequently, debt is originally with the original creditor. That's called active, or often it's current in the payments, but still with the original creditor. If the debt has gone very delinquent, it may move over to a collection agency. And everybody here, I'm sure, has heard about collection agencies. There are different types, those that are internal inside of the main creditor, and those that are external, meaning it's moved to a third party. This is where you will typically find the much more aggressive collection activity. Highly regulated about what they can or cannot say, but very, very frightening to a senior and often to their caregiver if they're not familiar with collections. And then lastly, if the debt is really delinquent, we'll find that the debt has actually moved to a debt buyer. A debt buyer is somebody who went to the original owner of that debt, paid 5 or 10 cents on the dollar, and they now own the debt and they are trying to collect. And in our experience, we find the collection activity gets a lot more aggressive. So a couple cautionary things you should know. State of Illinois has a 5-year statute of limitations. What does that mean? And let me be clear here first to say that neither Jim nor I are attorneys. We're not providing legal advice. The information I'm giving you, you could Google and pull up. This is general business advice. But there's a 5-year statute of limitations. So what that means is if the debt went delinquent and they have the debtor has not made a payment for 5 years and no legal action has been taken by the owner of the debt, they can no longer take legal action. So why is this important? Well, in the seniors, frequently they'll get the collection call and they'll be terrified. It's a very frightening experience, particularly for a senior who's probably run a very a good, solid financial life, and now suddenly they find themselves in this crisis. They feel very guilty, very afraid. And often the creditor, the collection agency, will encourage the client to make a payment in good faith. But if they're near the statute of limitations or past it, and they make a payment, that new 5-year statute of limitations starts over again. And that is the reason they encourage them to make a payment. Example, you're delinquent, you haven't made a payment for 4.5 years. They encourage you to make a payment and you send a payment in, you now have another 5-year holding period. So what we look at frequently is if somebody has come to us and they're delinquent. I'm sorry, I heard something. Do you need me to stop for a moment?
No, I think
No,
you're fine.
George.
Okay.
I think everything's good, but can everyone mute their devices?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, it's okay. Anyway, So if we're looking at this and we know if the debt hasn't been paid in 5 years, then there's no way that anybody can collect. They cannot sue. Okay, so we have other options. The client, if they're in very distress, may just never make the payment. Or if they have funds, we can negotiate a settlement at a very aggressive rate. So statute of limitations, very, very important. Second is homestead. This applies to seniors or their caregiver, if the debt is in the caregiver's name, that own a home. So if they own a home and an unsecured creditor files lawsuit for non-payment and prevails, means they win, now they go to collect on that judgment. Well, there's things they can collect against and things they cannot. And in the state of Illinois, the first $15,000 of home equity is immune from the rights of another creditor, $30,000 if it's joint. So if they have, for example, a home worth, say, $300,000 and the mortgage is $290,000, that leaves $10,000 of equity. Then if they are sued and found there's a judgment issued, they have to, they cannot collect against that home equity, therefore they cannot take the home. I would also add to you, if there's more equity than this, while the collector may be able to attach a lien to the home, it's not a simple process actually collecting that. So again, often they're open to a negotiated settlement to be able to make that happen. Otherwise, they have a lot of other legal expenses. Preferably, we don't want it to go that far, of course, okay? But there are options that exist not to panic. So there are the two things we look at: statute of limitations. You should always be aware of that if you're dealing with somebody who's having any stress over this, and also homestead provision. Of course, if they're renters or they're living in a caregiver's home and the debt is in the name of the patient, that doesn't apply. That debt doesn't transfer over to their caregiver, even if that caregiver's family. Okay, that's a lot. I know I'm giving you a lot there, but it's really important because the senior gets very frightened, we find. We can go to the next slide. I'm trying to keep an eye on time. I know we have a limited time here today. This we've already covered, Janelle. Thank you. If we can go to the next one. There we go. Few other things that are important to know. So let's assume we have a patient, or again, the caregiver, and they are struggling with a judgment. In other words, somebody has sued them, has prevailed. There's a judgment that's issued. Terrifying for people, particularly the first time if they're unfamiliar. You should also know that there are a few things that, even though there is a judgment, that cannot be touched. They cannot touch their Social Security. So that's safe. If they get a pension payment, that's safe. If they have retirement assets like a 401k or an IRA, that is safe. Okay. There would be other assets that could be eligible for a collection. But for many that are struggling in low to moderate income, these are the primary assets that they have, and they cannot be attached in the course of the judgment. So sometimes with this knowledge, okay, I would tell you we're working with individuals who may be under extreme financial stress and are forced not to make the perfect choice, but to make the better of bad choices, okay? So knowing their rights, very, very important to eliminate their fear at a time in their life when they just don't need that. Can we move to the next slide, Janelle? Thank you. I'm going to introduce Jim here. Jim Sullivan is headed up our Pay for Care program, as I mentioned earlier, and he has a lot of direct contact actually counseling clients that are struggling with chronic illness as well as their caregiver family. So Jim, let me turn this over to you next, please.
Thank you, George. First, let me point out that financial scams are a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just limited to the United States. Every country experiences that. Victims are not limited to the elderly. one of the reasons elderly get a lot of publicity is because as we age, our natural defenses against protecting ourselves against scams actually decreases. In addition, the elderly have such a concentration of the wealth through their retirement fund. That's where the scammers go for the money. Like the famous bank robber, why do you rob banks? That's because that's where the money is. So the elderly present a nice target for the scammers. And as I said, it's a worldwide phenomenon. Different ages of victims are attracted by different types of scams. So you have younger victims are more interested in what's a hot investment out there that I can invest in, while the older victims tend to be lonely. They're maybe widows or widowers, and the scammers first approach them as in kind of a romantic road, and they form a relationship. And if you want to read a devastating story on what this looks like, the June 8th edition of the Wall Street Journal, so just a few weeks ago, had a story called "She Hooked Me," how an online scam cost a senior citizen his life savings of $715,000. He was attracted by this young woman that was in what's called a scam den located in Asia, who was given a phone, a script, and his name. And she established the relationship and eventually, as I mentioned, took $715,000 from him in the course of the scam. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is these young women themselves who are doing the scam are exploited by being put in these scam dens and threatened with violence if they don't do the bidding of the people who are running the scam. So it's a brutal system. In this particular case, you can tell by the name, it's called pig butchering, which shows you how little respect these people have for their victims. And it's a type of fraud in which scammers seduce strangers online and build on their trust and convince them to put money into bogus investments. But moving on, as George mentioned, when I typically would become involved in a family where there is a financial scam going on or financial problems, it is usually a crisis mode. You don't have a chance at this point to do financial planning. What you're doing is financial problem solving. And part of that, I'll give you a quick example. A lot of times when somebody is suffering in the early stages of dementia, and I lost my older brother about 2 years ago to Alzheimer's, and early on, my sister-in-law was noticing the effects of the dementia on Rick's cognitive abilities, and it took her a while, I think, to really convince herself that there were problems going on that she needed to address. And what happens is when the family delays being intervening in this issue or don't be proactive, usually by the time they are proactive, their loved one has run up debts of $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 of credit card debt, and they've acted totally out of sync with the way they treated money in the past. And so this is called dementia blindness, and it really benefits both the family and the victim to admit there's a problem as early as possible. Don't let it get out of hand by running up debt to those levels, and start working with the family member as quickly as possible, as hard as it is to admit there might be a dementia problem that has to be addressed. The other thing I always recommend to families is the best way to deal with preventing financial scams is really to work hard to be proactive. So you take a close look at things like the Medicaid, the doing a Medicare benefit or benefits inventory. A lot of times, let me give you a quick example. A client who had moved up from downstate Illinois to help her mom, who was in the early stages of dementia, to be the caregiver, had very little idea as she started up what protections did her mom have, what benefits was her mom and her mom signed up for. So what I usually take the family through is what benefits have they signed up for? What are the protections that they have? Are they, for example, eligible for not only Medicare, but Medicaid? So they're duly eligible. In Illinois, you can actually be paid as a family member for providing care for your loved one. And there I introduced her to Catholic Charities, who runs that program for the state of Illinois, because otherwise the daughter couldn't afford to quit her job and move in to be the caregiver for her mother. So a lot of states have those programs. There's also other elements of care provided in Medicare that people aren't aware of, like home care. You can get up to 35 hours a week of personal home care under the right circumstances for a Medicare beneficiary who has skilled care needs at home, is homebound, and Medicare will pay up to 35 hours of personal care, not skilled nursing, but things like bathing, toileting, helping them dress. Finally, George mentioned student loans. A good client of mine, a friend of mine for 40 years, died in December of cancer. His last question to me was, he was concerned. Now, Terry was 75 years old, and his last question to me was, what's going to happen to a student loan that two of his adult children had taken out and he had co-signed for? It was over $100,000, and he was afraid that once he passed away, they would be saddled with debt that they could not afford to pay off. Well, fortunately, we have that type of expertise at Consumer Debt Counselors. So we had our student loan expert work with Terry. As it turns out, he had co-signed what's called a Parent Plus loan. So when he died, the total debt died with him. His kids no longer have to face the possibility of having to pay a debt they can't afford. So once Terry passed away on December 28th, we helped he and his family notify the loan servicer, and that student loan disappeared. So that's just an issue of, you don't think with elderly people, student loans are an issue, but often they really are. And it was a great relief to Terry to have that off his mind as he had reached the last few days of his life. So dementia blindness is an issue. Try to deal with problems proactively, admit that there are problems, ask for family members to also kind of confirm your judgment. And that's what my sister-in-law did with my brother Rick. We had a family reunion, and there's 6 siblings in my family. So she asked each of us to talk to Rick and see what we thought about his mental condition. As it turned out, he did have Alzheimer's disease, a very aggressive form that took his life in about 2 or 3 years. But those are the proactive things, getting the finances in order, that can help reduce the chance of financial fraud. And that's why we take a pretty broad look when we're brought in to a client to help them through this situation. So I'll turn it back over to George.
Thank you, Jim. Just to put a little bit of a fine point on that, I would tell you frequently as we've dealt with caregivers, they're generally dealing with some confusion over which of the debts that their patient, assuming it's a family member, are going to transfer over to them. These are all areas that are a great deal of confusion and in a very stressful environment. And folks are working with people in stressful environments all the time, so I'm sure you can appreciate this added level of stress. Even if we can't completely unwind everything, but they have knowledge of what their rights are, what can or cannot be done, is what gives them some mental peace of mind at a time that they really need that. So thank you, Jim. If we could go up one more slide here, I think we have just a little bit remaining. So how we work with folks, by the way, is as I said earlier, is once we're dealing with them, we start with a full assessment of their circumstances and determine from their finances exactly what options there are. In most cases, I would tell you, we're frequently dealing with people with very sometimes limited income and more debt and other issues than income. So looking at a lot of the key things that Jim just talked about, like dual enrollment in Medicare and Medicaid, as well as any other sources of income that can help support the budget for the caregiving family, is really, really important. What I should mention to you a little bit of how we work. We do provide our initial consultations free of charge. We just have always felt this is a really, really important thing. People who are struggling with this are generally calling at a time when there's a real crisis. They're not looking for a bill for services. They're looking to get some guidance as to what can be done. So we do provide that for free. We do have different fees for our services depending on the service offered. Many times we get support from the credit granting community and others. So we do have funding sources, and many times the fees can be waived. Oftentimes working in conjunction as a part of an overall program sponsored by another nonprofit agency, and we're jointly involved in getting funding to provide the services for the clients that are in need. So we do have a variety of ways of working, and if any of what we're doing here is of any kind of interest to you or for your clients, we'll certainly provide you a number here at the end. But I will add for any of you here that are on the call, if you're dealing with a client that is struggling with a question, and you do have a question, we'll be giving you this number. We encourage you to call. And Jim or myself will certainly happy to talk you through the individual circumstance and kind of give you what we're seeing on it from a financial viewpoint, what options might exist for the client. So we make that available to you certainly without any kind of a fee, so that you can get a little bit of an idea of what can be done for that client. Janelle, if you can move up one more slide, let me provide everybody with a phone number, please, here. So this, Jim is the one who'll be taking all the inbound calls. The number there is provided. Jim is a great resource to get help or guidance or just answer questions. Frequently, people are calling in and they want to know some basic information and see if the services we provide are even going to help. So that's a lot of material coming at you very fast. Let me stop at this point and turn this back to Janelle. If there's any questions or anything that we can answer here. Janelle, did we lose you?
No, I'm sorry. I was on
Okay.
mute.
Okay.
Well, thank
Okay.
you
That's
both,
okay.
George and Jim, for your expertise and for sharing your knowledge. We truly, truly, truly are thankful for this, and we know that it's so needed within our community. So thank you for just the different avenues that you spoke about. And I did have a question. I remember when we met one-on-one, you shared with me that there was a group within Illinois that if people needed free legal advice, that they will offer that. And I wanted to know if you could share that information.
Yes, if I actually, I'm trying to locate them. I'm not sure that they're still in operation. So we've been trying to locate them, but there was a firm that we had worked with that helped clients who are what we call de facto bankrupt, meaning they are clients that really have no assets that can be collected on, and they're getting calls from collectors. It was a service that allowed the call to be directed to this law office in exchange for a monthly fee. So the stress of that collection phone call was taken off of the taken off of the patient. But unfortunately, it appears that law firm may have, the principals may have retired. So I'm struggling finding an alternative for you, Janelle. As soon, but should I find one again, I absolutely will. Valuable service. I will tell you, we know when we're talking to clients, particularly the caregivers and the patients, those calls are very, very stressful for them. So in the interim, if anybody here has people struggling with that and you need guidance or help or just some basic information, call Jim. We're happy to help you any way we can.
All right, well, thank you so much. And I'll open it up to the group to see if anyone has additional questions or just feedback for you all, comments.
I just want to say thank you for coming. This was such a wonderful talk. My parents just went through some financial exploitation the last couple of months, and it was a terrible roller coaster for them. It took them a couple of weeks to resolve it. So I just want to thank you for commenting on that. It's just it's a very serious problem. I'm a geriatrician at University of Chicago, so I have patients who've been exploited, and it's just a terrible, terrible thing when it happens. So thank you for bringing it up.
It is. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stacy, for sharing that with us. Does anyone else have any questions for Jim or for George? Okay. Well, that means that you guys did a really great job explaining.
One are good, very good or very bad, right?
No, I'm sure it's all very, very good. And I do have you all's contact information. So you gave your number in the last slide, and I'll make sure that when we send out our follow-up email, that contact information is provided. So if anyone does have any questions later, or you want to refer anyone to them, you can do so through contacting Jim Sullivan. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. And thank you to Janelle and to all of you, by the way, for all the work you do. Very much appreciated to be here.
Awesome. So now is the time when we shift gears a bit, and everyone who's on the call has the opportunity to share any resources with each other, as well as if you have any upcoming events that you'd like to let us know about, this is the time to do so. So I'll hand it over to you all. Is there anyone? I know we had Margot here from Centers for I'm drawing a blank, but I know you had some information that you wanted to share.
Sure. I'm Margot. I'm program coordinator with Center for Disability and Elder Law. We're a nonprofit legal services organization here in Cook County. Lisette Ortegon, who is our staff attorney, is also, or one of our staff attorneys who is also on the call. And we will be, we're granted a grant from Illinois Department of Public Health to launch a program for early planning for individuals with early stage Alzheimer's or related dementias. And so we're launching our first event, which will be with Solutions for Care in North Riverside. And that's going to be on July. We have them in English. And then we're also doing the series in Spanish. Lisette will be doing that in Spanish. And it'll be on July 16th. And July 23rd in English at Solutions for Care. This is for doing advanced planning. So it's for power of attorney documents, as well as some additional advanced planning documents. And they'll also be in Spanish, July 18th and July 25th, which are Thursdays. Same thing. And then for those that are eligible, we'll be able to actually meet with an attorney one-on-one and do advanced planning, power of attorney documents for healthcare and for property as well. So we look forward to what we'll provide. We're happy to provide any more information, and we will be continuing to launch the program. Our grant is to serve communities that are underrepresented or have been impacted by ADRD, as well as marginalized traditionally and currently by the legal and medical field. So we're really looking forward to continuing this work, and thank you for letting us announce it.
Absolutely, and it coincides a bit in our presentation for today, so it's great that you're able to announce that. Now, I know that you also provided me with flyers, so I'll make sure in our follow-up email that that information is shared. But if anyone has questions directly for you, are you able to provide your contact information in the chat for us?
Absolutely. I'll put our contact information in there.
And I see we have a hand raised, Regina Hampton of Access Community Health.
Good afternoon, and I did enjoy that presentation. But I just want to announce that we are having a health fair in, let's see, August the 3rd. It's a Saturday from 10 to 2 at our location of 54th and Whitworth. And those of you who want to come, it is back to school focused. However, we do have a pop-up food pantry that's going to be there. Whoever comes and wants food, they don't need an ID or live in a certain zip code. So for people who might need to boost up their grocery inventory, it's a great opportunity to do that, and also take advantage of some other resources that might be available. And if there's anyone who might be interested in having a vendor table out there, just let me know. If we have space for you, we'll be happy to invite you. Thank you. My contact information is in the chat.
Well, thank you so much, Regina, for sharing that. I don't see your contact information in the chat. Do you mind posting it again? Just in case anyone else is missing it. And if you have any flyers, definitely send them my way and I can share them with the group.
Will do.
All right, are there any more announcements? Anything else to share with us?
Actually, Janelle, I would love to share some information. Hi, everyone. This is Renee again. And I am also I'm part of the advisory committee for Age Guide Northeastern Illinois. And they are going to be hosting their Aging Summit coming up on August 21st from 8 to 4 at Northern Illinois University's Naperville campus. I know it's a little far out in the suburbs, but they actually have a fantastic lineup of different presenters, as well as different resources that are going to be available. And early bird rates are going to be ending soon here. So I'm going to post that information, that link in the chat for everyone, because it's a great event to be able to connect with others, again, continually get resources, and be able to learn more about all the work that Age Guide's also doing.
Thank you so much, Renee. And I see that link in the chat now, and I'll make sure to share that as well. I see another hand. Harriet, how you doing?
Okay, I had a question on the announcement regarding the helping write advanced directives. Is that on site only, and where in North? Will you follow up with those details in the email? Was it Lynette that gave that announcement?
Yeah, this is Margot. Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, Margot.
It'll be on the flyer, but it's 7222 West Cermak Road in North Riverside. But we at Solutions for Care, but we'll also be continuing the program in many areas throughout Chicago. So this is just our first launch. So
Right. So this is launching people who have no advanced directives.
correct. Yeah, working with people on
Okay.
powers of attorney for
Right.
healthcare and property.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I see Lisette just posts in the chat 2 flyers, so those have more information. Is there a way though that we can register to know about upcoming workshops down the line?
Yeah, if you would be able to send me an email, I'll put your I'll continue to update anyone. If you send me an email, I can also send it to you directly, Janelle, and then you can send it to the rest of the group. But if you're interested in being on our mailing about upcoming workshops, please send me an email. And I will get you on our list. Thank you.
That sounds good. Thank you. All right. Are there any other announcements or questions or even just experiences that someone would like to share, things going on in your work, in your community? Mhm. Well, I'll share a few things for Share Network. In regards to our monthly caregiver support group, we usually meet on the third Wednesdays of the month, and this month we will postpone our meeting. We're revamping some things and having some new partnerships. So as we get that underway, we will resume the following month. So just be on the lookout for that. We are also continuing with our Mind Over Matter, Healthy Bowel, Healthy Bladder, and Continence workshops for women ages 50 and older. And so if you or someone you know could benefit from that knowledge, you can always email me to register for our next upcoming workshops. Those workshops are in person and virtual. And I'll make sure to post my information in the chat. But honestly, if you received an invite today, you have my information. So I believe everyone who's logged on here has my information. But then also, Renee just posted in the chat our link to our website, Share Network Chicago, where you can find all of our programs and upcoming events, as well as our handy dandy resource guide electronically on our website. And in the future, if you or any of your staff, your programming are interested in educational programs, then you can contact myself or Renee Kropowski, our administrative director, or really anyone on the team, and we can support you with organizing that. So with that, I thank you all again for your time. I thank you again, George, Janice, and James Sullivan, or better known as Jim, for your time, your expertise, and just sharing really that great knowledge on how we can understand debt better, creditors, and the way it's affecting our elderly and how we can support them. So I've already sent people your way. I hope you all send people their way, because we do know that this is very needed and that support is needed for our older adults. So with that, thank you all so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you on the second Tuesday of every month at 2 p.m. Same link, same time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone take care.